This is topic 8.14 and 8.15, wrapping up Unit 8 for AP Environmental Science. All right, so we're on toxins and diseases. So, last video we talked about different ways that we learn about toxins. We mostly focused on dose response curve, but another way that we can figure out hazards from a chemical is a retrospective study. So that means we can look at what happened to people. For example, in 1984, Union Carbide pesticide factory in Bhopal, India, released this methyl isocyanate gas accidentally. And so for the past 3 decades, scientists have figured out what happened to the humans who were exposed. So that's a retrospective study. And you can see what happened here. We have respiratory systems and stillbirth. That stillbirth is when a baby comes to term but is born dead. So a miscarriage is when a mother loses the baby before it's old enough to be born, and so it dies. A stillborn is a baby that's full term and almost full term, and it dies. Okay. The World Health Organization tracks hazards and diseases, primarily infectious diseases caused by pathogens. You also need to know, again, acute or chronic that we talked about in the last video. Acute diseases rapidly impair the function of a person's body. Chronic are slow. So like heart disease is chronic. Heart disease and dying from a heart attack doesn't happen overnight. It happens of many years of eating poorly and not exercising and smoking, etc. Okay, the causes of death in developed and developing nations differ. Many developing nations' most significant causes of death have to do with poor nutrition and hygiene. Hygiene is how clean things are and sanitary. In developed nations, deaths tend to occur due to chronic diseases, cancer, heart disease. The change in risk from more developed nations doesn't go away, it just simply changes. Let's talk about pathogens. So pathogens are microorganisms that cause disease. Pathogens will often hit poverty-stricken, low-income areas because they don't have the money for good sewer systems and for clean drinking water. And so that can spread infectious disease. But there's other pathogens that it doesn't matter how sanitary or clean a place is, like the flu. I live in a clean community, sanitary community, and still lots of people get the flu. Lots of people get COVID. So there are some that are not influenced by that. All right, let's talk about with climate change. So there are some diseases that are equatorial type. That means they like hot weather, hot and moist weather. And they are spreading north into higher latitudes and south towards the South Pole in places that would be considered subtropical. Subtropical, or places like Florida would be considered subtropical. Temperate is where I am in California. And so with climate change, we have less cold days that kill things like mosquitoes that carry diseases. So we now have more diseases in place we didn't have before. Here are the leading causes of death in the world. So the leading cause of death is cardiovascular disease, then infectious disease, but remember, this is the whole world. This is not developed or developing countries. In developed countries, the number 1 and 2 together are cardiovascular, which is heart disease, and cancers together is the number 1. Infectious disease is much lower in developed countries. Death from it. In developing countries, it is the number 1 cause of death, infectious disease. And the type of infectious diseases you can see is things like HIV, respiratory infections, childhood diseases that we have vaccines for in developed countries, malaria, tuberculosis, diarrheal disease like cholera. And you can see here high blood pressure, tobacco use, the differences between high income nations and low income nations, and the types of diseases that come from these things in different parts of the world. And you can pause the video and take a look at the diagram. Okay, so we can skip this one. Let's talk about two words. An epidemic is when, like the flu epidemic, if it's in a particular area and a lot of people have it, we say it's an epidemic. When COVID first started, it was an epidemic in China. Then it spread to actually northern Italy. Once it spreads and it goes global, we call it a pandemic. So there's different ways of getting pathogens. Some come through the air, like COVID comes through the air. Some pathogens come in our water supply if we don't have clean drinking water, like cholera does, Giardia does. Other humans can give us diseases, whether they are cold and flu from sneezing on each other, or whether they're sexually transmitted or skin to skin transmitted. Bad food can, if you've got food that has grown bacteria like E. coli or salmonella, it can make you sick. Some animals carry diseases. You learned in history about the Black Death, which is the bubonic plague, was carried in fleas on rats. So it actually had two vectors. A vector is a carrier disease. So bubonic plague had two vectors, fleas on rats. And then sometimes we can get certain things from domesticated animals. For example, sometimes there's a swine flu that comes around, and swine is pigs. So it is a particular virus that can go from pigs to humans. Right now, this year, the price of eggs has skyrocketed because of a bird flu that has killed off a lot of chickens. And bird flus can sometimes go to humans. So you have some separate notes on these types of diseases. So I'm going to skip most of this because you have separate notes on the diseases you have to know in this class. In general, tuberculosis has gone way down since the invention or the discovery of antibiotics, but it has actually remained stable since the year 2000 because now we have some antibiotic resistant tuberculosis. And we have some new emergent. Emergent means like they've gone away and come back. Like West Nile virus is an old virus that went away for like 100 years and then came back. And then we have some new ones that have emerged, like COVID, which is technically SARS-CoV-2. Some bird flus. HIV was really in the past century. It came out, it emerged. Ebola emerged, Zika. So there's newer diseases that have mutated and emerged. Here's some more, again, diseases you have. Some of these you have to know, some of them you don't from this chart for the AP test and my test. So make sure that you pay attention to our separate notes on the different diseases. And here it is, study your disease chart. So how do we prevent diseases? Well, we need proper drinking water. And if you are in a major, well, even a minor city in the United States, you're going to have clean drinking water. If your drinking water from your faucet is not clean, they have to send out massive health notices. So we have the Clean Water Act that gives strict standards. They're stricter than bottled water for safety. And so we do have clean drinking water for the most part in the United States and Europe and many other countries. Improvements in nutrition, proper sanitation. Sanitation means good, clean environments, clean streets, sewage, proper sewage disposal. people having a good, healthy lifestyle, you can prevent, even if you have genetic markers for things like cancers, many times people can prevent those genes from being expressed or turning on through living a healthy lifestyle, having a good weight, eating lots of fruits and vegetables and antioxidants, exercising. And then make sure there's education to prevent diseases, control of mosquitoes, and enforcing and strengthening laws that protect humans. So we have a couple of laws again. You did learn about these previously in this unit, but make sure you know the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. So pause the video and write down those if you don't remember those two laws from previously in the unit. And then we have basically we have drinking water standards. What is the maximum allowable? For example, arsenic, you can have 10 parts per billion, ppb 10 parts per billion. Mercury can have 2, which means that human health is not really affected at these low amounts. Notice that no fecal coliform, no giardia, those things are pathogens in the water. Can't have any in our drinking water. And then the last thing is that in our waters, these would be surface waters in the US, here's the leading cause of pollution in these waters. So you can pause the video and just be reminded of a lot of these toxins and a lot of these pathogens that can get into our surface water. Okay, that is it for this unit.